Hey, it's now 4:30 and we're ready to start. So thank you very much for letting us know who you are. If you haven't done that yet, if you can possibly pop your name in the chat box, that would be brilliant, and also your school. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by my colleague from BNF, Stacey. So I'll ask Stacey to introduce herself shortly when Stacey is going to do her presentation, which is around nutrition and gut health myths and false promises. And having seen Stacey's slides earlier on, I think you're going to find it a really interesting session. And do let us know if you've got any questions for Stacey as you go along, because Stacey will be staying with us at the end to answer them.
So, as Frances mentioned, we are colleagues at the British Nutrition Foundation, and I'm a senior nutrition scientist. I work in the science team. So I'm sure that many of you have seen lots of messages, both in the news and online, suggesting that the bacteria in our gut might be linked to all sorts of aspects of human health. And you may have seen some terminology around this. So the words microbiota, microbiome, what do we mean by these? Well, a microbiota is a community of microorganisms in a specific environment, such as the gut. And the microbiome is broader than this. So as well as the community of microorganisms, this also includes their role within a specific environment, considering environmental conditions and their interactions with each other. So the bacteria that are in our gut, what sorts of things are they doing? Well, they're helping us to digest our food. They can synthesize some vitamins and other nutrients. They help with the development and training of our immune system. They can help us to metabolize some medications that we might need to take. And they also have a role in resistance to pathogens, and they can also help to reinforce our gut barrier. So this is a barrier which ensures that if anything does get into our gut in the way of pathogens, for example, through the food that we're eating, that this can't then come into contact with the rest of the body. So the gut microbiota really is integral to human health, and there is a complex relationship there between the gut microbiota and our metabolism. So some observations have been made that link the composition of the gut microbiota, so the species that are there and the proportions that they are there present in, to some aspects of health and disease, particularly health conditions. So there are some examples here on the slide. So what this means is that it's been observed that individuals that might have a particular health condition tend to have a different composition to their gut microbiota than a healthy individual that does not have that health condition. But what we don't know is the direction of this relationship. So is it that as an individual develops a health condition or a disease, does their gut bacteria, the composition of their gut microbiota, change in response to the development of the disease? Or is it the fact that the composition that was present within their body to start with actually plays a role in the development of the disease? And so that's unclear at the moment. So I mentioned that we can all have different gut microbial compositions. Lots of different factors determines the microbes that are present. So these are quite varied. So geography, where you live, whether you have taken any medication, or whether you have a particular health condition, your age, whether or not you exercise, whether you were breastfed, the mode of the delivery of your birth, and also components of your diet. So we know that what we eat can induce changes in the composition of our gut microbiota. But what we don't know is whether these changes are actually big enough or whether they last long enough to actually have an influence on our health. What is clear is that we don't know what the composition of a healthy microbiome is. And so there isn't an agreement on what the ideal composition for health might be. But there are certainly lots of studies going on in this area, and we continue to learn lots about the different bacteria that are present in our gut and also what role they might have in human health. So research into the effects of diet on the composition of the gut microbiota is at an early stage, but there's certainly some promise there that changing our diet may have a therapeutic potential. So more human studies are needed in this area, and it's important to take care when extrapolating the results from animal studies to the human intestinal microbiota. So thinking back to those headlines that I showed at the beginning of the presentation, it's always worth, if you're reading an article, always worth in the first instance finding out whether the study that's being reported was actually carried out in humans or whether it was an animal study. So on to fibre and the importance of it. So there's a large amount of focus on reducing nutrients such as salt, saturated fat, and free sugars in our diets in order to improve health. And there are very good reasons for that. There are established links between excessive consumption of these nutrients and particular negative health outcomes. But what we know from a large study called the Global Burden of Disease Study, which looked at people's diets in many different countries and linked this to health outcomes, is that what is absent from diets can actually be a greater marker of risk than what's present in excess. And so it's really important for us to remember the eat more messages so that we place an emphasis also on making sure we're getting enough of the foods that are associated with better health, so whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and fibre. So I'm sure that all of the attendees on this webinar are very well aware of the Eat Well guide. And so some modelling work's been done, and it was calculated that if all of our diets were brought in line with the Eat Well guide, we could see some health gains from this in relation to increased life expectancy, averting tens of millions of disability adjusted life years, preventing hundreds of thousands, excuse me, of new cases of type 2 diabetes. And it was calculated that 23% of these health gains would be attributed to increases in fibre consumption. So we know from a report on carbohydrates and health from the Scientific Advisory Committee on Nutrition that was published in 2015 that diets that are higher in fibre are associated with reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, coronary events, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and colorectal cancer. And randomized control trials also indicate a beneficial effect of dietary fibre on constipation. As this talk is about gut health, I thought I would just zoom in on colorectal cancer. So why is it, do we think that diets higher in fibre can reduce our risk of developing colorectal cancer? Well, fibre can be metabolized and fermented in some cases, depending on the type of fibre, by the bacteria in our gut. And this can influence the types and patterns of the bacterial populations that are present. So for example, if you increase the amount of fibre in your diet, then those particular bacteria in your gut that can metabolize fibre may increase in abundance. When fibre is fermented within our large intestine, this leads to the production of metabolites called short-chain fatty acids. One example is butyrate, and this is known to have anti-cancer activity. And I'll come back to short-chain fatty acids later on in the talk. And a final potential way in which fibre can reduce our risk of developing colorectal cancer is through reduction of intestinal transit time, so reducing the amount of time that it takes for food to pass through our body, and also increasing fecal bulk. And both of these factors, or both of these effects, result in reduced contact between potential toxins in waste and our tissues in our colon. There's a lot of information on this slide. This is just in case anyone's interested. We have all of this available on our website. The address is at the bottom of the slide. So this is showing different components of dietary fibre. So for example, cellulose, lignin, pectins, resistant starch, some more information about them and also their food sources. That's on the left hand of the slide. And on the right hand side, this is a list of authorized health claims for particular types of fiber. And this means that these are health effects that are seen with consumption of particular types of fiber. And when I say that these are authorized health claims, this means that the amount of evidence for these effects has been deemed to be sufficient so that food manufacturers are able to communicate about these effects on the labeling in relation to their products, as long as particular conditions of use are met. So a good example that everyone may have heard of is a type of fiber called beta-glucan, which is typically found in oats. And this can contribute to the maintenance of normal blood cholesterol levels. On the left-hand side of the slide, we can see our UK fibre recommendations. So everyone aged 16 and over should be aiming to consume 30 grams of fibre a day, smaller amounts for children. And if we have a look at the table in the middle of the slide, these are our average intakes for different age groups. This is from the National Diet and Nutrition Survey. So you can see that intakes are well below recommendations in all age groups, with very small proportions of the population actually meeting the dietary reference value for their age group. And you can see from the figure on the right, this is the gap between the amount of fiber that we are consuming and the amount of fiber that we should be consuming. So I'm sure this information will be familiar to all of the attendees, but this is just to illustrate the difference in quantity of fiber present in whole grain or higher fiber versions of starchy foods as opposed to refined versions. And again, just some more figures here for interest, showing the quantities of fiber per portion for different foods, pulses, fruit, vegetables, nuts, seeds, just so we can really try and visualize what we might need to be eating if we're going to meet that 30 gram per day target. So why aren't we eating enough fibre in the UK? Well, we know that over the years, purchases of some starchy foods, including bread and potatoes, has declined. Less than a third of adults achieve their 5 a day. We're only consuming very small quantities of nuts and seeds on average. We're also not consuming enough pulses in order to bring our diets fully in line with the Eat Well guide, and a proportion of adults and children do not consume any whole grains. We have this 7-day meal plan on our website, which might be of interest. This shows just one way of putting together a diet for the week, which will not only meet the fibre recommendations, but also all other food and nutrients-based dietary guidelines in the UK. And so this is based on 3 main meals a day plus snacks. And what my colleagues in the science team noticed when they were putting this together is that in order to reach 30 grams, the starchy foods that form the basis of the meals, these had to be whole grain and higher fibre choices. The snacks had to be higher fibre snacks. You'd need to consume around 8 portions of fruits and vegetables a day, and also incorporating pulses, nuts and seeds was all helped to meet the target. This figure is from a review paper where they pulled together the results of lots of studies where they spoke to consumers. So, for example, in the form of focus groups, and asked them their opinions. This was specifically about whole grain, but really, when you look at studies that have asked consumers about fibre more generally, you do see the same sorts of things. So in terms of barriers that were listed by consumers that took part in these studies as to why they found it difficult to consume whole grains, the most common ones were dislike of the taste or texture, poor availability. So for example, if you're out and about rather than eating at home, the fact that they can be more time consuming to prepare and eat. Cost can be a factor that might be difficult to identify, for example, in the supermarket. And I will talk a bit later on about difficulties with labeling with fibre. lack of knowledge of the nutrition and health benefits, and also a lack of appeal in some cases. So I'm sure you'll all be well aware of the messages that are currently found in the Eat Well guide to encourage us to get enough fibre in our diet. So 5 a day, choosing whole grain or higher fibre versions of starchy foods, and also eating more beans and pulses. And if we look at better health, the messaging here not quite so explicit in terms of fibre, but certainly 5 a day and also whole grain having a mention there. So talking about fibre to consumers is a bit of a challenge for the food industry. One of the reasons for this is that there is no authorised general health claim for total fibre consumption. So just to give an example of what I mean by that, manufacturers would not be allowed to say, for example, fibre keeps you fuller for longer in relation to a product. There are some authorized health claims, as I showed previously, in relation to some specific fiber types. But in the context of gut health, you can see that the wording of these really might be off-putting. Manufacturers might think that these might not be very appealing to consumers. They might not actually want to list this on their label. So thinking about increasing fecal bulk and acceleration of intestinal transit. It's not mandatory for fibre to be declared on nutrition labels, and fibre also is not included within the format of reference intakes, nor is it included within traffic light labels. On to prebiotics. So what are these? So the official definition, a prebiotic is a substrate that's selectively utilized by host microorganisms, conferring a health benefit. So in other words, this is a substrate that is specifically used by types of bacteria in our gut that might be beneficial for our health. Now, there are some candidate prebiotics, and more evidence is gathering for those, but at present, the prebiotics, the substrates that have been accepted as prebiotics are all types of fiber. So fructans, phosphoninulin, and galactans, including GOS. So I mentioned earlier that types of fiber that are fermentable are fermented by the bacteria in our gut, and this leads to the production of short-chain fatty acids. And these are thought to be beneficial for our health for a variety of reasons. So they provide fuel for our gut bacteria, and they're actually the preferred fiber is actually the preferred type of fuel for our gut bacteria. Short-chain fatty acids protect the cells lining our gut, and they also stimulate the release of gut hormones, which then send a signal to the brain that we've consumed food. So there are many potential health effects of probiotic fibers. Probably the most important one to mention is that because they are specifically metabolized, they increase the abundance of bifidobacteria and lactobacilli within our gut. These are types of bacteria in our gut that are thought to be beneficial for health. Several other potential health benefits listed here, but important to say that more research is needed to show if modulation of the composition and function of the gut microbiota translates into health benefits. There is one authorized health claim for use in the EU and Great Britain in relation to prebiotics, which is chicory inulin contributes to normal bowel function by increasing stool frequency. This just illustrates the quantities of prebiotics that are found in some common foods. So you can see that, for example, the main sources of fructan in the UK diet are wheat, onion, banana, and garlic. And prebiotics are also available in much higher quantities within supplements. What about probiotics? What are they? Well, they are live microorganisms that, when administered in adequate amounts, confer a health benefit on the host. So these are typically found in yogurts or other fermented dairy products, as well as in supplements. Probiotics are named in the same way as all living things. So there's a genus, a species, sometimes a subspecies, and a strain. So some examples of probiotic names here on the slide. I think what's important to say about probiotics is that it's a common misconception that we consume these live bacteria in the form of probiotics and that these then take up residence in our gut, but it's actually not the case. What they do is that while they are passing through our gut, they produce various substances that might be beneficial. They interact with our immune cells and our gut cells. They interact with dietary components that within our gut, taken in from our food, and they also interact with our resident gut microbiota. And it's important to say that different strains within the same species can have different health effects. And there are no authorized health claims at present for use in relation to probiotics. So this means that manufacturers of such products cannot communicate in relation to their product any specific health benefits coming from consumption of the probiotics. There is certainly some potential for probiotics to be useful in a clinical setting. So, for example, there's some evidence that probiotics can reduce diarrhea that can occur when we take antibiotics. That probiotics can be useful in helping to manage some symptoms of IBS, and even that probiotics might decrease the risk or the duration of common infections, including the common cold. But it's important to say that more research is needed to clarify the specific strain and doses that are needed for many of these clinical targets. Onto fermented foods. So fermented foods are made through desired microbial growth and enzymatic conversions of food components. On the slide, I've summarized the results from a literature review from a group of researchers at King's College London. They were specifically looking at the effect of fermented foods on gut health. So first of all, in relation to tempeh, miso, kimchi, and kombucha, they weren't able to find any human studies looking at these foods in relation to gut health. The most widely investigated fermented food was kefir, and so there was a suggestion that consuming kefir may benefit lactose malabsorption and also to eradicate H. pylori, which is a particular gut infection. There was some limited evidence that consuming sauerkraut might reduce the severity of IBS symptoms. There was also some limited evidence related to consumption of natto, in that this may increase stool frequency and modulate the gut microbiota. And there was also some evidence that consumption of sourdough bread was actually tolerated better than standard bread in those experiencing gastrointestinal symptoms. However, the studies were of low quality. So overall, there's very limited evidence of effects of fermented foods on gut health. And also when thinking about fermented foods, really important to say that because of the way that these are made, which may not always be standard, the composition of these in terms of the microbes that are present can really, really vary. Something that's interesting in terms of yogurt, which is a type of fermented food, is that there is an authorized health claim for yogurt, which is that live cultures in yogurt or fermented milk improve lactose digestion of the product in individuals who have difficulty digesting lactose. So this is because the bacteria that are present produce the enzyme lactase, which is necessary to break down lactose. And it's important to say that the effect is limited to lactose that's consumed with the yogurt itself and does not persist after the yogurt's been eaten. So to sum up, really, in terms of fermented foods, this is a really broad category. It includes lots of different types of foods. And at the moment, there's not enough evidence to give specific advice about fermented foods per se. These don't feature in UK dietary recommendations, apart from the fact that yogurt is an important part of the dairy food group within the Eat Well guide. So there is some evidence that yogurt specifically has some health benefits, but the evidence is not strong enough for us to have a recommendation that we should all be eating yogurt. Nevertheless, we're all aware that yogurt's a good source of nutrients such as protein and calcium. And so it does feature on the Eat Well guide. So gut health is important. And so in terms of fermented foods, they're there for people to try. If they like the taste, they might have some beneficial effects. But overall, there's much stronger evidence for fibre and gut health from a public health perspective. We have lots of relevant information on some of the topics that I've covered on our website, nutrition.org.uk. So we have webinars on fermented foods, breastfeeding and the infant gut microbiota, personalised nutrition, gut microbiota and prebiotics. We also have lots of information about fibre, including this Fun Way to Fibre resource, which you can see on the slide. And we also have a video, which is quite short and which might be of interest. So that's the web address there. We have a series of tiles for social media, as you can see here, which give tips around how to up the fibre content of different meals. We also have a one-page resource on pulses, as you can see, as well as a series of information about nutrition and immunity. And finally, for those who are really, really interested in all the detail, we've got lots of papers in our peer-reviewed journal, Nutrition Bulletin. There's some examples here on the slide. And for further sources of information, I would recommend the International Scientific Association of Probiotics and Prebiotics. The web address is there. They have some nice infographics. And if anyone is particularly interested in the colorectal cancer aspect, then the best source of information for that is the WCRF. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stacey. That was really interesting. And in fact, we've had a comment from somebody in the chat box saying, well done, Stacey, evidence well presented and explained. So thank you very much for that. As I said earlier, if you've got any comments or any questions, please do pop them in the chat box and we'll come to them later on. I'm just going to share my screen again now and just go through some of the resources that we've got available on Food A Fact of Life that will be able to help you with your teaching. And then we'll come back to Stacey afterwards with any questions that you might have. So just having a look, first of all, about digestion resources. And as you can imagine, we've got lots of different types of resources on Food A Fact of Life. So we've got a variety of presentations, worksheets, some videos, and also some quizzes. We've got some Kahoot quizzes and some fantastic self-marking quizzes if you want to save yourself a bit of time marking. And we've got the resources for 11 to 14 years and 14 to 16 years, and also resources for younger pupils if you're interested in primary aged resources. We've got some knowledge organisers which are around digestion, particularly for 14 to 16. We have one completely dedicated to digestion, and 11 to 14 years, it is part of the energy, nutrients and digestion knowledge organiser. So those are available on the website, and they are just part of a much bigger series of knowledge organisers if you haven't seen those yet. And then also we've got some fun interactive resources on the website where we've got a digestion drag and drop. So we've got an image of the body and the names of the internal organs and the processes that take place, and they can be then dragged and dropped into the right place. We've also got something similar, which we call a digestion hotspot, which again is a picture. And then if you click on it, you get further information about the particular process that happens in the organ or body part. And then we've also got a fibre lineup, which is an interactive version of another activity I'll show you in just a minute. You will get this presentation tomorrow that's sent to you, and also it will be on the website. So you'll be able to have all of these links and also refer back to what Stacey was talking about too. Okay, some resources around fibre. Now, Stacey talked a lot about fibre, and we have lots and lots of resources available. So it's recently been Fibre February. So we've got a pack, a fibre activity pack, which has got a teacher's guide and lots of different resources and activities that you can do with pupils. And of course, it's been Fibre February, but fibre is important throughout the year. So please don't think that these sorts of activities can just be done in that month. They're very relevant for the rest of the year as well. But alongside that, we did have a blog on the website, which was linked to Fibre February, but it gives some really nice ideas of some different activities you can do around fibre and links to those different resources as well. So some of the other things we've got some fantastic fibre cards, which have got the amount of fibre per 100 grams and per portion for different types of foods. We've got a challenge-based activity for 14 to 16-year-olds. And this is around variety is the spice of life, but it's about special dietary needs. And it could be that the dietary need could be around increasing fibre. We've got a Make It with Mince challenge, which is about increasing a high fibre dish when using meat, and that could be quite a nice way to adapt a recipe. And then we've also got some other presentations and quizzes and different types of resources around fibre. And then we've got a fibre lineup activity, and this is the one I said we've got an interactive version of as well. And this comes with lots of different cards which contain fibre. And the pupils have to put them in order of the amount of fibre per 100 grams. And you get given the cards, but also you get given the answers as well. And it's really interesting, and it's a great point of discussion where the pupils are quite surprised at the different amount of fibre in foods, and also the different amount of fibre in different sort of types of foods. So white rice versus brown rice, for example. So the link is on the screen for that. And then also I thought I'd remind people about these. These are our food route journals. We do have different activities for primary pupils as well, but these are particularly for secondary pupils. And these two focus on diet and health. And there are aspects in these around fibre. And these are really nice journals that can be printed off for the pupils, and they can be done as a sort of cover lesson if need be, or a standalone activity, or a homework over a period of time, a week or 2 weeks. And they produce sort of a really nice journal for the pupils, just based on their own diet and health and what they could improve, how they can improve their diet and health. So a little bit about resources. We have got lots more on the website. That was just sort of a brief snapshot of them. So the best thing to do really is to just go onto the website and go into the search function. And if you just write digestion, or you write fibre and hit return, and you'll get all of the different types of resources that we have. The other thing is that we do have some resources around dairy products, and we've got a new presentation on yogurt as well. So if you were interested in that, based on the information that Stacey was giving you earlier on, those are there too. Just want to remind people about Healthy Eating Week. Coming up in June, registration is now open. We've now got 1,000 people registered, which is fantastic. And part of this is going to be a focus on fibre. So that's going to be one of the days in school. So you can really link to gut health and fibre intake during Healthy Eating Week, as well as 5 a day, varying your protein, staying hydrated, and reducing food waste. So do register. We'd love to have you on board. Before we come to Stacey with some questions, just to remind you, you can keep up to date with our free resources and our training. We're just coming to the end of this year's training programme, but we are planning next year's training at the moment. So if there's anything particularly that you feel would be useful for us to include on our training programme, please do let us know. We do have our education news. Hopefully you've been receiving that, and then we've got this new lovely looking education news that's been coming out. So hopefully you've enjoyed the new version of that. We also have a personal professional development newsletter. We have Twitter, and we also, if you wanted to keep in touch via email, we have a separate education email inbox. And also I have added on to the screen about our BNF News newsletter, which you can actually register for as well. And if you go onto our website, if you scroll to the bottom of the page, you'll be able to register for BNF News. So a little bit about other training, although I said we're coming to the end of our webinar and our workshop programme for this year. We're going to be doing some more from April onwards. We do have our online training. So this is our free modular courses, and we've got lots around the functional properties of food, sensory science, food spoilage, hygiene and safety, and then our characteristics online courses as well. So one for secondary and one for teaching pupils with additional needs. So those are free, they can be done in your own time, and you'll get a certificate of completion at the end. And then all of our training is recorded. So if you have missed something in the past and you'd like to watch it back, all of the webinar recordings are on our YouTube channel, and the link is on the screen for that channel. Okay, so before we finish, let's just see if we have any questions for Stacey. I've got a couple of questions. Right, let's just go back. So some very nice comments for you, Stacey. I'll pass those on to you. So here we go. So Stacey, did you say prebiotic are not useful in lactose intolerant? So in the lactose intolerant.
No, I don't. I think that's a bit of a mix-up, perhaps. I was talking about yogurt in as an example of a fermented food. So I'm just looking back at my slides, just wondering where that comment came from and what it was that I might have said. So apologies. I'm not certain where that has come from.
We can always pick up on that one, Stacey,
yes,
if you'd rather.
Yes, I think that was more about the authorised health claim for yogurt, which is live cultures in yogurt or fermented milk improved lactose digestion. I think was where that was mentioned. Thank you, Frances.
Okay, we'll come back to that one if need be. Can a person have too much fibre in the diet? What would happen to the body?
Goodness me, I don't know. That's a great question. And I don't know, but I'm happy to look into that for you and get back to you. Okay,
we can do that. Right, there's a question for me actually about the resources and whether they're differentiated for pupils with special needs. We do have a whole area on the website which is dedicated to resources for pupils with additional needs. So there are some on there around healthy eating and diet. So you might want to have a look at those. But actually, all of our resources are editable, so you can actually adapt them to make them suitable for your particular setting and your pupils' needs. Okay, let's have a look, see what else. Okay, so there was one question for me. And Stacey, we've been thinking obviously a lot at the foundation recently about the cost of living crisis and how we can support people. And some of the things that you've talked about today about pre and probiotic supplements and fermented foods and things like that, some of those can be quite expensive. Is there anything that you can actually recommend if people are having to be aware of cost of living and what they could do if they didn't have the money or didn't want to go and buy supplements and fermented foods?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's really important to always keep in mind the fact that a healthy, balanced diet and varied diet can be based on everyday foods. So you really don't need to be going to specialist shops or as you say, paying lots of money for these supplements or functional foods. We don't need to consume probiotic or prebiotic supplements in order to be healthy. we do, of course, have some advice as a nation around, particular instances where supplements are important, such as, folic acid, vitamin D in the winter months. So really, I think when just thinking about trying to meet the 30 grams a day recommendation for fibre, some good tips to remember are with fruits and vegetables, for example, dried fruit also counts towards one of your 5 a day. You can also use frozen or canned fruits and vegetables. And if we're thinking about, so I touched on the fact that one of the roles for the gut microbiota is in relation to our immune system. So if we're thinking about having a varied diet and getting all the nutrients we need, we can also think about things such as canned fish, for example.
Okay, all right, that's really helpful, thank you. There was a similar question to the sort of the fibre and having too much, but this was more about sometimes people can find having a bit too much fibre a bit sort of sensitive on the digestive system. Is there anything that we can say about that?
So yes, absolutely. If you dramatically increase the amount of fibre that you're having very quickly, this can result in some gastrointestinal discomfort. And so the advice there is to increase it gradually, to remember to drink plenty of water, and also to exercise to try and prevent that.
Okay, all right, that's really helpful, thank you. Someone's mentioned that they teach fermenting and it can be made very economically. It's a shame how expensive it can be to buy. So I think that sort of plays out what you were saying, that some of these things are expensive, but you can actually make them yourself. I make yogurt myself. I enjoy making yogurt. So another question, actually, you mentioned that our gut bacteria have a role to play in immunity. Is there anything that can be done in terms of diet and lifestyle to improve our immunity?
Yes, so interestingly, there are a number of vitamins and minerals that support our immune system. So I think I mentioned during my talk, so it will be there on the slide, we have a series of resources on immunity. And so there are, in fact, 10 vitamins and minerals. So they're all listed on there, but some examples include vitamin C, vitamin D, some of the B vitamins. So important, again, just to say that you can get enough of these as long as you're having a healthy, balanced and varied diet. So it's very important to emphasize that just because a particular nutrient such as vitamin C is needed to support the normal functioning of our immune system, this doesn't mean that it's a good idea to then go out and say buy a supplement and have large doses. We know that these micronutrients play a role, unfortunately, due to situations of clinical deficiency, when you can see the effects. And so we are fortunate in the UK in that cases of clinical deficiencies are quite rare. So certainly making sure you have a healthy, balanced diet. Also exercise has a role in supporting the immune system, as does getting enough sleep. And that's an interesting one because it's not actually fully understood how getting enough sleep helps to maintain the immune system, but we all know that of course, it's just important for overall health to make sure we're getting enough good quality sleep.
And that's a really good point, actually. And in fact, actually, on the website, we have some nice resources around sleep and a workshop for parents around getting good sleep and how important it is for children. So that's good to mention that. So thank you. There's one more question, I think, Stacey, and whether this is one you can answer now or whether we'll follow up, is the advice different for those with diabetes or kidney disease? So I'm not sure whether that's specifically around gut health or about immunity.
in relation to sort of fibre, or
Uh,
is it unclear?
it's unclear actually, so perhaps that's one we'll follow up.
Yeah, great.
Okay, that's
Thank you.
great. All right, well, thank you ever so much, everybody. Oh, gut health. Dawn's come back and said gut health. So is the advice different for those with diabetes or kidney disease around gut health?
I'm not aware of anything off the top of my head, but again, it's certainly something that I can look into and follow up on that one.
Okay, that's brilliant. All right, well, thank you so much, Stacey. That's been so interesting, and all the comments on the chat box actually agree. All the delegates say that as well, so that's fantastic. With regards to the presentation that will be shared with you, it will be uploaded to the website, and you'll be able to access all the links to the resources and to Stacey's slides as well. And as soon as I end the webinar, you should hopefully be redirected to the evaluation. If you're not, then please don't worry, we will send it out to you via email tomorrow, but we do really appreciate your feedback. So do complete the evaluation if you can, and you'll then be given the link to the downloadable certificate. So thank you very much, Stacey. Really appreciate your time and your expertise. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today, and I hope you have a great evening. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Goodbye.